A staunch advocate of data protection and privacy, he brings over 2 decades of tactical experience in the architecture, development, and management of secure, scalable systems. Please welcome the Regional Director, Advanced Security Solutions at BlackBerry, Nader Henein.
Good afternoon. So I'm going to take you through a short journey to talk about the value of information. The example I'm going to use is that of information security. I've studied computer science, I've studied economics, and I've studied law. All of this tells me that there is a huge gap between the side of education and then when you hit the practical side of actually doing business. The bizarre case of economics and cybersecurity really has parallels in most facets of business. It starts when we're children. When we're kids, we learn about investment at a very early age. When you put amount of money towards something, you get something in return. You have €1 in your pocket, you can go buy a piece of candy, and you can enjoy it. You start learning about money. But the first time you go to the amusement park, you see this massive toy, something you can put coins in, and you have this opportunity of winning something far more valuable. So now you're in a force multiplier in terms of ROI. You can invest money, and you get a toy. You invest, in many cases, a coin, let's say €1, and on average, a child, a 6-year-old, 7-year-old, 8-year-old child, will attempt 6 times to win a toy that ultimately is worth no more than €1 because of the excitement of winning something. Incidentally, if you want to talk about numbers, an adult, somebody 18, 19, 20 and over, will attempt 13 times. So apparently, as we get older, we are more cavalier with money and we are more open to bigger risks. Having said that, this is our first foray into investment, putting money towards something and we want something in return. In business, we see this every day. If you want to make an investment, if you want to put in a system, you have to justify that investment. So from there, we look at the education side. What do our teachers tell us? Well, I can tell you what they tell us in security. In security, they teach us a very weird perspective on value. When we learn about security in university, there are 3 main facets that we look at. We call it the triad: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Those are the 3 important things. Nowhere there do they mention value. Nowhere there do they mention how much is this supposed to cost you. So most of us, when we go into the first day at work, we are given a job. We're given something to secure, a bunch of servers, some information. And I can tell you this from experience. You walk in, you're given this, and you start applying what you've learned. How am I going to secure this information? I think confidentiality, integrity, availability. I think of the countermeasures I'm going to be putting in to secure this information. And oddly enough, that's the same approach that most people in information security take, whether it's their first day at work or whether they're 20 years into the job. They start by looking at how I'm going to protect this information, and they don't ask the one seminal question. What is the value of this information? If you ask most chief technology officers today, or chief information security officers, to give you the value of the information that they're protecting, they're going to look at you with blank faces. Because there is this gap between the business who understands the value of the information because they're charged with taking this information and turning it into dollars and cents, and the IT team who's charged with keeping the systems available, making sure this information is secure. One spends the money and one makes the money, which is why there's this perception amongst business people that information security or IT is a cost center as opposed to a revenue center. Because in IT, we don't look at the value of information. We prioritize, we do some business impact analysis when we want to see how much we should spend, but we really don't know the value of information. If I ask a chief technology officer today, what's the value of credit card details of a customer? They'll struggle to answer the question. They'll need to come back to me later. I work with companies in Fortune 100 organizations all the time to measure the value of information, and based on that, prioritize and secure. It starts with this. What is the cost of a breach? When you lose information, we all heard about Target, we heard about the Snowden files, we saw how much the value of information is. I am, as the introduction mentioned, a staunch privacy advocate. I think privacy is invaluable. It is not by chance that Article 12 of the International Declaration of Human Rights places privacy at the same footing as freedom and liberty. So, your CFO doesn't care about that though. He cares about the math, the dollar value. So the value of a breach, the cost of a breach to a company gets measured in different things, and it's changed over the years. But there is some math behind it. So let's look at the math. Like I said, it's an economics conversation. There is a model called the Gordon-Loeb model. This is used today within the insurance industry to value information and to identify how much they're going to insure you for. The insurance industry does its homework, trust me. They look at things like breach probability. They look at decreasing marginal returns, a point at which the amount of money you're spending isn't giving you the same yield. And what they're trying to get you is the optimal security investment. And the way they do this is by seeing how much is this information going to cost you if it's breached, if it's lost, and then telling you you're not supposed to spend more than 37% of that value. But it all comes down to one critical ask. What is the value of the information? And a lot of companies are afraid to go down this path because of the complexity. It's worth it, I guarantee you. Because if, as a technologist, you walk into your boss's office and you say, we want to spend X amount of money to buy firewalls and intrusion detection systems to protect against multi-petabyte DDoS attacks, he'll look at you blankly and say, and how much is that worth? What does that give me? But if you can present a defendable dollar value that says, this is how much it's going to cost you, this is how much I'm protecting. If you walk into your CFO's office and say, I am protecting $24 million of information, and you're arguing over $300,000 to protect it, how much are you spending to protect this building? Security guards, camera systems. We spend so easily on these things, whereas we fight spending on protecting information security, and that's where most of the core value of businesses sits today. What's the motivation, though? Like I said, I'm a privacy person. So I think any amount of spend to protect my private information is worth it. But others look at it from a different perspective. What's the stick? The carrot is that you're protecting your customers' information. If you protect your customers' information properly, you become the safe place to do business. It's marketable. But others look at it as a regulatory requirement. And over the world, across the world, it varies from one country to another, from one region to another. In Europe, on the other hand, the regulation that manages security and privacy has developed quite well over the years. It's called the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation. And 10 years ago, it used to be £100,000 maximum fine that you would pay if you lose your customers' information. That's the ceiling. And because of that, a lot of big multinationals would buy the risk by saying, okay, instead of putting in all this security, I'm going to put in €1 million in a box. And that's going to be my breach budget. So every time I make a mistake, here's 100,000. That's if I make a mistake, if I get caught. So the GDPR learned from this and turned around and said, I'm going to make a bigger stick. So today, the penalties are up to 2% of companies' worldwide turnover. And the ceiling is up to €100 million. So nobody's buying that risk anymore. Now it's being taken seriously. For those who used to buy the risk and say, I'm going to put this money to the side, and if I get caught, I'm just going to pay it out, that's no longer an option. Like I said, I don't like that approach, but at the same time, legislation and regulation needs to back up information and requirements. So how do you make all of this work? Well, if I'm going to leave you with anything, it's this. Start by calculating the value of the information that you have, the cost to replace it, the cost to reproduce it, the reputational cost. When people lose customer information, the customer doesn't want to do business with you anymore. How much is it going to cost you to fix that? The regulation and the fines, and how much are they going to cost you? And for all of the risk that you can't mitigate, you buy insurance. And how much is that going to cost you? For startups, for VCs, calculating the value of information is critical. Because most startups, when you're getting value today, they ask you how much money you're producing, and they say, okay, revenues multiplied by 8, multiplied by 10, and that's your value. But in fact, there's another value, the value of your information. And how much are your assets worth? We do this on a daily basis to justify spend, to make sure that you're spending the right amount of money on security and that you're properly protecting your customers' assets. There's a lot to be said on this field, and I'll be happy to have a conversation with you at your leisure. So if you want to grab me later on, I'm more than happy to answer your questions. Thank you.